You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, today we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into this idea of what is it like to have over $500,000 in student loan debt. And we are fortunate enough to have Sam Tillapa on the show with us today, talking about her story coming from the Philippines to the United States at the age of 8 years old, experiencing almost this wealth dichotomy where in the Philippines, she had 3 nannies coming to the United States, living with her family of 5 in a less than 200 square foot space. And then from there, going to dental school inside the United States at the most expensive dental school in the country, graduating with $550,000 in student loan debt and making the decision to pay it off aggressively. This is her story. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing well. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Sam. I think the story has a little bit of everything. It has, like you said, this wealth dichotomy of growing up wealthy in the Philippines and then coming to the US for a, quote, better life, but having to start off in this 200 square foot bedroom. It has a story of them making it, but having to keep up with the Joneses and having $10,000 birthday parties and things like this. There is a lot to this story that we could go any number of ways. And I'm just fascinated to hear everything that Sam has to tell us and the audience. So with that, Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And I think what Brad was alluding to is that your story has covered a breadth of experiences, which frankly is mind-boggling to me at almost a personal level. And I want to go back to, these early days and start with talking about this wealth dichotomy. Like, break that down for our audience. What was going on there behind the scenes that started with you, basically living this life of abundance and wealth in the Philippines and then coming to the United States and living in a 200 square foot space with your entire family?
I was born in a third world country. I was born in the Philippine Islands. And my parents they had pretty well-off jobs. They were both engineers, pretty good money. And for the first 8 years of my life where I was living in the Philippines, we were considered one of the more well-off families. So a lot of our cousins and relatives, they would come hang out with us, and we would always have like the coolest toys considered back then, comparatively, I guess. Me and my brother and my sister, we each had our own personal nanny. We call them yayas. So we used to have our own yaya who would take care of each of us individually. And we lived in this house with each our own bedroom. So it was pretty cool. Around when I was 8, my dad got a job offer in the United States. So he decided, I'll take the job and I'll move my family because, a better life is kind of what he was thinking. So he came ahead of us. He left about 8 months early.
Can I ask you one question on that? Like, what does a better life mean for him? So it sounds to me like you have everything. What do you think that really practically meant for him, a better life?
So it's funny because I threw out that we had everything comparatively. So compared to the other people in the Philippines, we had everything. When I look back and I think about the lifestyle there and the lifestyle here, though, I see so much more excess here than over there. So he kind of knew, I guess the rest of his family came here when he was still young. He was the only one that was left back there. And he kind of knew that there was this difference. It was like the Americas was like another level of just having everything. It's that American dream, like having a lot of freedom, big house, safety. Safety is a big thing in the Philippines. It's like there are only certain areas that are really safe. So he knew like the standard of living was just a lot better in the United States.
So you're describing this level of wealth and the US being another level in essence. But what I found interesting in reading studies and such is that humans are really social animals that work on comparison. So it's not absolute wealth, but it's usually in comparison to the people around you. So I wonder, in your mind's eye, like when you think of your childhood, did you think of yourself as wealthy in the Philippines and poor in the US? Or did you think of yourself as, oh, we're in the US, so we're wealthy? Like, do you recollect that thought process?
Yeah, I do actually. It is true that a lot of our perceptions of wealth is comparative. So I do remember in the Philippines, I was always being reminded by other people about how lucky we were and how well we had it. And then when I came here, I did always feel like everybody else had more, which is interesting because it wasn't until I was older that I kind of looked back and I saw this stark contrast between actually how much less we had in the Philippines versus the excess that I was surrounded with when I was in my early teens and early 20s. Looking back on it, it is such a big dynamic shift from where we were to where we are now. And I agree, my dad did bring us to a place that gave us kids more opportunities, just kind of opened our world so much more to some things that we would not have had access to if we had stayed in the Philippines.
That's interesting. So that access, that is something that it sounds like you really hit on, because you've described the excess of the US. And obviously we all in the FI community know that. You have this amazing article that I hope we'll talk about later, the ever-growing list of things I've given up in the name of frugality, which is just, it's such a wonderful list and it really resonated with me. So there clearly are these excesses, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But it sounds like it provided you opportunities beyond just this extremely comfortable life you had in the Philippines, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even with the student loan debt that we're going to get into later, talk about later, I do notice that it still is a privilege because it allowed me to pursue this dream that I wanted to be a dentist ever since I was 8 years old. My mom, actually, she didn't want to be an engineer. She wanted to be a medical doctor. But back in the Philippines, there's no such thing as student loans. So unless you're from a really, really, really rich family and you can pay that amount in the very beginning before you even start school, you can't really be a doctor there. So that was kind of one of her, I guess, regrets, is she couldn't pursue the career that she actually really wanted because there was just no opportunity for her to do that.
So your parents come to the United States together, and I have to assume, are they starting from scratch at this point, or do they have a community that they're leaning on that's able to leverage them kind of through the economic chain? What does this look like for your family, and then your dad having, kids that he's providing for at the same time?
Yeah. So my dad came here first. We didn't really we had family that was already living here. We moved to Northern California first. So a majority of our family was in Southern California, kind of far to really lean on them in a day-to-day basis. We had guidance from them, but other than that, there wasn't really anybody that we relied on. So he kind of started from scratch. He came here 8 months before we did and found a way for us to come and then a place to live momentarily until we got ourselves settled in. He kind of just did that on his own. So I'm really grateful for everything that he did in order to put us at a place where we could kind of get our footing and then get going.
So Sam, it sounds like this is the classic immigrant story, that your dad came here looking for a better life for his family, and he hustled and worked for years. And I'd love to hear your recollection of his story.
Absolutely. My dad, he was working as a mechanical engineer. And on top of that, in order to kind of help provide for his family, he also took 2 additional side hustles to bring in more income. So he would work on the weekdays, 9-to-5 job at an engineering company. And I remember at night, he would then go onto a later shift to work as a janitor at Staples. And then on weekends, he would work as a retail associate at Robinson's May. So he definitely had that hard work ethic, which he instilled upon, me and my siblings. And I think that's part of what makes us kind of push through things today. But yeah, he definitely worked hard to get to where he was at.
That's a really incredible story. And it just strikes me as we kind of talk more and more about your story, how the actions that you saw your parents take really is tied to this. I was curious, you mentioned that you wanted to be a dentist from the age of 8 years old. And you also mentioned that your mom had aspired to be a doctor, but that just practically speaking, it wasn't even a possibility in a place where degrees were entirely based on how much cash you had on hand. Do you see the threads there from what your mom wanted to do to why you were willing to go to dental school at any cost?
Yeah, definitely. She was kind of I'm not sure if I said I wanted to be a dentist first or if I heard her story first about her wanting to be a medical doctor, but probably my early teens and later teens, she was definitely part of the inspiration and motivation to pursue this dream of mine to become a dentist.
Sam, did your mom ever get to explore any of her dreams to be a doctor in any way? Or was she ever able to I don't know, dip her toe into the medical field when she was here in the US or pursue anything professionally that really challenged her? Because I mean, someone who wants to be a medical doctor when they're young and is told they can't, to me, that could be crushing, or it could really light that fire for you going forward, and you never know where it ends up decades from now.
Yeah, she ended up pursuing engineering, and that's where she met my dad. But when my sister, who's a year younger than me, was born, she gave that up to be a stay-at-home mom, which she dedicated her life to, raising us kids. When my brother was 5, actually, and he went to school, she went back to work, but she started working at school. And what she does now is she is someone who helps with autistic children. So she works at the school district, at different schools, at different locations sometimes, or sometimes at the same school for a whole year. And she works in a classroom of autistic kids, and she's one of the aides. And she's been doing that for more than 15 years, I want to say. So I guess that's kind of related to a little bit of the medical aspect, but mostly she's just a guiding force for younger generations, which I think is just as awesome.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, raising her children and then helping out in these classrooms with children with autism. I mean, that's just someone who wants to help. So, wow, that's a really cool story. Thank you for telling us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're recording this in basically the middle of 2018. And right now, there has been a lot of mainstream coverage on how expensive some of these dental programs are. This is a particularly interesting conversation because I know that you ended up getting into and going to the most expensive dental school in the country. This is going to be an economic conversation a little bit later on, but let's talk about the individual that just now is planning on going to school. What were the economics that were running through your mind from maybe even a naive place in time? How much did you think you could make? What did you think that school would cost? Did you have any concept of the economics of the situation that you were getting into? Or was it just simply go to school at any cost, get the job?
I definitely had no idea how much a dentist would make in the state that I was planning to work in. I did have an idea of how much dental school would cost. I knew if I went to a quote unquote cheaper public school, it would be around $350 or so. And if I went to a more expensive private school, it would be around $500,000 to do the whole 4-year program. I applied to a couple of schools and I just kind of I knew I wanted to be a dentist. So I wanted to take whatever opportunity was given to me, which ended up being a private school. So that's kind of why I went with that. As far as how much a dentist would make, I think I wasn't really thinking about I want to make a lot of money. I was kind of more thinking about this is what I want to do and I want to help people. So it wasn't really a concern for me how much they made. Now I think I should have probably thought about it, definitely. But, I was just going to take whatever I could take in order to get to where I wanted to be. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that presents us the opportunity that we have now to talk about this from the other side, because you realize, so I had $168,000 at the time when I was talking about my loans. That was a big number. I didn't have anything to anchor it to. And when talking to a bunch of my friends that maybe were teachers and had 20 to 30,000 of loans, or the bachelor's degree that came out with maybe 50 to 60, 168 seems like a big deal. You might be the first person that I've actually talked to, over Skype in this particular case, that had over $500,000 in student loan debt. At what point did the gravity of that hit you?
Right about when I was graduating, actually. It's such a funny story because, so at the end of dental school, when we're about to graduate, everybody is required, at least at my school, to go through this loan exiting program, which they call loan exiting program, but it's just a 1-hour session during lunchtime where you sign in and someone kind of presents your loan repayment options. So when they were presenting this, it kind of hit me really hard because I was engaged already to be married to my now husband. And I kind of saw how this huge loan could possibly negatively affect our relationship. And I've had something in the past, where it happened to me, where someone close to me, there was a financial situation that affected me negatively and changed the way I viewed finances in general. So I didn't want to carry this into our marriage, into our relationship, and kind of have that same effect. So that definitely scared me. I wanted to free me, but also free him from this thing that I brought upon myself in order to pursue something that I wanted to have.
So Sam, I want to just back up for a quick second, and I'm going to be the naive one here. So this is a 4-year dental program, and you're describing somewhere in the vicinity of $550,000 in student loan debt. So can I assume that 100% of your tuition, et cetera, went to student loans? Like you didn't pay for any of it with cash? Is that somewhat accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay, so these programs cost like roughly $135,000 a year. Like, is that the actual sticker price?
So I'm actually looking at the 2017-2018 program. It's estimated that it's $136,000 for the first year of dental school. Yeah, so you were very close.
Well, I was actually thinking some of that would have been interest, because interest is accruing, although it may not be compounding. It's simple interest, but it's accruing the entire time, right?
Right. So, I mean, the 136 number it includes indirect costs to go to dental school. The direct costs, which is just like tuition, health fee, scrubs, like materials, it's about 108,000. So 20 something thousand of that 136 number is actually for indirect costs of going to dental school, which would be like housing. If you do any humanitarian outreach programs, which I did, you have to pay for those out of pocket, and, food and regular everyday living.
What school is this?
This is USC in Los Angeles, California.
Oh, my heart is hurting right now. It's so much money.
It is. It's a lot.
I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. So on day one, when you walk in and you're putting 100% of this to student loans, how do those loan programs work? I don't want you to dive into like every minor detail, but are these government loans? Is it through the school? Is it, I can't comprehend who would loan someone $135,000 a year for education, I guess, but obviously it happens all the time because there are many people with more than $500,000 of debt. How does that functionally work?
So the process is actually really easy to get these loans. They are government loans. There's a specific loan that you could get. So there's Stafford loan, which is it has a maximum, which doesn't really give you very much. But after that, you can get a graduate plus loan. So that's how a lot of these graduate students are getting this loan, is because the graduate plus allows you to borrow a huge sum of money in order to go to school.
Okay, so that makes sense. So we're always looking for actionable tips for the audience. So if you could go back and put yourself in the shoes of Sam a couple months before going to dental school or when you're getting ready to apply, would there be anything that you could do differently? I mean, even down to picking a different school, but more importantly, are there ways to get scholarships? Are there financial aid grants that are available at certain schools? Are there different ways to do this less expensively, I guess?
Well, other than picking a different school, I think you can apply to a couple of scholarships, financial grants. The thing is, I didn't really qualify for a lot of them because, for example, your parents have to make below a certain income, and it's a pretty low threshold. So I didn't really qualify for those ones. Some of them you have to be a U.S. citizen. And at the time when I was applying, I was still a permanent resident of the United States. And it wasn't until I started dental school that I became a U.S. citizen. So I was definitely cut off of those loans. You could apply to be in the military, and that's a really good program if people are looking into something like that. You'd apply and they would pay for your schooling. And then after schooling, you would be in service for 4 years and on reserves for 3, which isn't bad. It's 7 years total. But other than that, that's all I could really think of.
Wow. So really, most dentists, and then certainly orthodontists who have to go to additional years, they're just spending $500,000 on dental school, and then much more than that if you want to be an orthodontist. There don't seem to me that many hacks, is how you're describing this.
If there was hacks, I must have missed them. I
Wow,
would have
that is
definitely done them.
yeah, no, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to grill you here at all.
No,
I'm
yeah.
just astounded. Like I'm really so like every dentist in every location in America is going to dental school for $500,000. Or even if they're going to a public school, you're saying it's still $90,000 a year. So it's still more than a third of $1 million. Wow, that is amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of really close friends of mine who are just very lucky and they have their parents kind of help them with paying for tuition and things like that. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who come out of it and still are at a good financial spot. But just for me, I didn't really have those kinds of resources to be able to access those things.
Well, what about the earning potential though? I mean, you don't just take out $500,000 in student loan debt to make $40,000 a year. You've got to be making a six-figure salary to even arguably justify this. Like, what's the Glassdoor range on this thing, both kind of for your state and then maybe just kind of even generically, even if there's a pretty wide swath? What are dentists thinking that they have the possibility of making in your profession?
The range is actually very big. It depends on a number of factors. For example, if you own your own practice, if you work as an associate, what state you work in. Southern California, which is where I live, it's very concentrated in the number of dentists. Seems like everyone wants to work here. So there's a dentist office at every single corner. It feels like when you're driving down the street. So it's a little bit more competitive. And my CFP and I, we did an analysis of the range or the expected income in this area in particular that I'm working at. And it's at about 100K. To throw out a number, last year, my income personally was 125K. So it's still a six-figure number. It's not something crazy, but I know dentists out there who own their own practice and they're making way, way more than that. So it just depends on your particular situation.
Okay, so now this actually puts us in a very interesting situation. I actually thought it would have been more than that based on your student loan debt. And so those economics, that's a little bit tough because when you're paying down student loans, you're paying it down with post-tax dollars and you're going to be at a higher marginal tax rate. So you make 120, you come home with 80 or 90, you're paying off your student loans with your 80 or 90. So it kind of keeps pushing down. When you have $550,000 in student loan debt, the interest on those student loans is somewhere in between $2,000 to $3,000 a month. That's before you even pay down the principal. It just you got this snowball working against you. It makes it really tough. The reason that's interesting kind of as an analytical experiment is that we're talking about this in the context of making a decision to pay it off using one of these student loan forgiveness programs that are out there, IBR. I know that you made the decision just to pay it down yourself. I would love to kind of take this opportunity to talk about that decision tree. How did you decide?
So it's so funny because when we were doing that graduate loan exiting program, I kind of wanted to pay down the student debt as soon as possible, aggressively. Everybody told me that it wasn't possible considering the amount of income that I was probably going to be making. So everyone told me, no, with a loan this big, you really want to do IBR, in which case you would pay the smallest amount possible and then wait for 25 years for the program to kind of forgive the rest of the loans that you've accrued, and you just pay taxes on that forgiven amount. But like I said, something happened to me negatively in the past, so that kind of made me want to just be debt-free. I just wanted the freedom from any debt hanging over my head. So I knew deep down that what I wanted to do was to pay it back in 10 years or less, if possible.
Yeah, Sam, I want to jump in real quick, if you don't mind. So of like your friends from dental school or your dental school class, how many of them decided to go the IBR path, and how many do you think have been aggressively paying them down? Do you have any sense of that?
I don't know anybody who took the path that I took. I don't know anybody who's paying it down aggressively, actually.
Wow. So every single dentist from, in your experience, obviously, we're not painting a broad brush here, but the people that went to dental school, it cost $500,000+, and they're basically just signed up for, hey, this is 25 years. I'll pay as little as I can. I'll take that tax bomb at the end, right, for the forgiveness. And that's just like the path. I mean, is that really what we're talking about?
Kind of. I mean, I almost felt like we knew how much it was going to cost before we started dental school. It almost felt like we were, I don't want to say brainwashed, but like, it was kind of accepted that this is what you do. You take out the loan, you go to school, and then at the end of 4 years, you have this huge debt, and the quote unquote smartest way to get rid of it would be to just wait the 25 years, pay the smallest amount, and pay the taxes on that at the end. So everyone that I talked to when I was graduating, I was trying to get some friends into the conversation and being like, oh, hey, what are you going to do? What are you thinking of doing? And their responses were all like, well, obviously the 25-year loan repayment. Why would I do it any other way?
Well, let's talk about that a little further. That is front of mind. One, because I believe it's, we just talked about him recently. Mike Moreau has been in the mainstream media lately for his story, which honestly, he went to the same school as you and a similar program. I think he was an orthodontist, so maybe had an extra year or two on the back end of that. But the numbers are comparable. The one thing that really stood out for me, one is in your story, you're saying, well, this isn't just Mike Murray. This is just what people that go to this school do because economics just don't work any other way. And then the second thing that stood out to me is when you were talking about having that tax bomb at the end, it's not just the difference between what you are paying each month and the $550,000. That $550,000 that you have now is growing with compounding interest year over year for the next potentially 10 to 20 years. And so while it sounds like, okay, well, let's say I pay $200,000 on IBR, my balance is $550,000. So that means that I have to owe the taxes on that $250 net. No, my friend. 10 years of compounding interest on $550K is a really, really, really big deal, right?
Yeah. So we actually ran the numbers in order to do this. So under the IBR program and the repay, you pay 10 to 15% of your income, which doesn't even cover interest. I mean, you have to remember interest each month is about $3,000, and 10 to 15% of $123,000. I mean, that's not even half of interest, or it's about half of interest. So you're accruing more and more. At the end of 25 years, actually, my debt would have accrued to over $1 million, which when we calculated it, you're taxed on that debt that you're forgiven. And so at that 25-year mark, I would have had to pay $400,000 in one go on that 1 year. Now, when you look at it, you look at what you pay per month and add that $400,000, and then you compare it to what I would pay if I just paid it down in 10 years. It's actually $100,000 less if I just paid it in 10 years. If I just bite the bullet and paid in 10 years, instead of waiting 25 years and paying that big tax bomb at the end.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wonder how many of your friends and colleagues have run those numbers and are going to have $400,000 sitting there to pay that tax bomb. Has that ever come up in conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the assumption is over 25 years, you'd be saving for that $400,000 tax bomb. And there are some good arguments too. I mean, those 25 years, you could be taking the extra money to kind of invest or, put it towards something where it could grow or you could build on that money. But to me, the benefits of being free 15 years earlier than other people who are waiting for the 25-year mark, I think that is really, really huge, just psychologically, but also just for me and my husband's life. We could do, once we're free, we could do whatever we want.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you brought up an important point. There's certainly the time value of money calculation that, the money now is not worth the same as 25 years from now. So clearly not exactly apples to apples, but still 25 years is going to sneak up on people really quickly, and $400,000 to pay in one fell swoop is difficult for anybody. And you have to hope, like you said, that they are saving and really putting it aside in like a lockbox type thing that they can't touch, because that's going to be devastating for people. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Especially with a loan this big, it accrues really quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so just to give me some kind of clarity on this. So what does your monthly payment look like? I know you kind of alluded to it, but what is the monthly payment? And also, are these loans locked in for any period of time, or could the interest rate spike up at any moment?
So my interest rate is locked in at 6.7%, and we pay a monthly payment of $6,500.
Wow, that is amazing. So that's like a mortgage on $1 million if you were to buy a house somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other thing, Brad, is that pushes up your margin. Like that's counting toward your take home pay, right? So just that alone, if $6,500 is your baseline, that means your minimum cost to live from year to year is somewhere close to what, $70,000, somewhere in that range?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then all of your actual living expenses are tacked on that. So if we talk about controlling your tax rate, this just kind of highlights how difficult it is to control your tax rate when you have this student loan burden. I was in the same situation. And when people were talking about how they were able to get their tax bill down to $0 on $150,000 of income, $0 in income tax, I was thinking to myself, not with student loan debt, you're not.
Yeah.
You just can't.
So Sam, where are you on this repayment plan now?
So I graduated in June of 2016. And for the first 6, maybe 8 months, we stayed on IBR because everyone was telling me, no, you can't do it. No, you can't do it. At some point, we were saving so much that we went to our CFP and he was like, actually, I think you can pay this off in 10 years. So I started probably in May of 2017. It's been a little over a year. And yeah, in the last year, we were able to pay a good chunk. We paid $84,000 towards my student debt.
That's amazing. That's a huge number. So what does that look like as far as, obviously you're making additional principal payments and presumably that makes each of your subsequent payments more valuable in essence, right? There's slightly less interest. If it works the same as like a normal like mortgage amortization, like is that 10 years reasonable? Are you looking to make that now quicker? I'm assuming if you paid off $84K in 1 year, what's the total number of years that you're actually looking at?
Initially, with the 6,500 payments, it was actually at 9.8 years. We stuck with IBR because there are a lot of benefits of sticking to IBR. For example, if one of us lost the job, we can always fall back to that. Okay, we'll pay 10% of the other person's income until, we get back on our feet. And so we never really left IBR. So it's still at 6.7%. But now that we've done the first year, I think it's very doable for us because we're still saving. We're still contributing to 401ks. We're still adding to our emergency fund. I think it's very doable for us to finally refinance, which means we can't go back to IBR once we do. And if we do refinance at a lower interest rate, we've been shopping around maybe at 5.5% is what it looks like they'll be willing to give us, then it would actually lower the number of years to 7.5.
And your husband works as well, right? So you're a dual income family?
Yeah, so that helps a lot that my husband adds additional income because I wouldn't be able to do this if I was by myself or at least not at this rate. It would be a little bit slower. But yeah, it helps a lot that he is helping out with this.
I mean, I just noticed, and I was just doing, back at the envelope math, but if you're paying off $84,000 a year, it basically sounds like your entire paycheck is like everything that you make is just going back to your student loans at this point. Is that close to accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very accurate. So I'm going to be working as a dentist for free for 10 years, which is fine.
You have to love what you do. That really does have to be the reason.
So Sam, I just want to make one comment and then a question. And you really highlighted this with preserving that flexibility with the IBR. I thought that was really interesting. And that reminds me of the decision that we've made to have a 30-year mortgage. And obviously we're not talking student loans here, but mortgage. And we basically decided to pay a slightly higher, and it is much less of a spread with mortgages, but slightly higher interest rate to preserve that flexibility of having that fixed payment for 30 years. So there was some value there. Even this was in a point where Laura and I decided, we're going to pay off our mortgage in 10 or 12 or 15 years. Logic would suggest, then take a 15-year mortgage. But to us, having that flexibility and to pay that little bit extra in interest rate was worth it. So I just wanted to highlight that for the audience, that sometimes there is that decision point of, okay, what is the best for me, not only today, but saying, once you've made this decision, in your case, to refinance and get the 5.5%, well, then you can never go back to the IBR. So that's a real decision point, and it's much less important with my situation here with the 30-year versus 15-year, but there is that analog certainly. So again, wanted to point that out to the audience. And I just wanted to ask one question about having this student loan. Have you noticed any negative issues surrounding this? Has it been harder to get anything like a mortgage if you even applied for one, or I don't know, insurance or something? Sometimes somebody looks at your holistic financial picture and says, it's all well and good, you're a dentist, et cetera, but you have $500,000 of debt. Have you seen negative repercussions from that at all?
So we haven't really gotten to the point where we're applying for a mortgage loan or anything like that. But I did hear that if you apply for a mortgage loan and you're under IBR, they kind of consider it. And so they say, oh, okay, well, you're only going to be your debt to income ratio, you're only making 10% of your income towards this loan payment. That's what they assume. So it makes it okay for you to get a mortgage loan. I do know once you refinance, they're going to consider the whole number. So that's going to definitely affect, especially if a company is looking for you to be at a debt to income ratio of like less than 40%, let's say. If they're looking at this $500,000 number, I think it would be very difficult for you to get a mortgage loan.
So there's two things that come to mind there. And I got to make sure I understood what you were saying correctly. Is the one is that you can kind of have the best of both worlds. Like you can be in the IBR program and pay it down more aggressively. Is that what you're actually doing now?
Yeah, that is what we're doing now. The only downside to that is it is at a higher interest rate percent, 6.7 versus, like I said, it would be like 5.5 if we refinanced. But yeah, that's definitely, and that's why we started with this option is because especially if you have a loan this big and you're just starting out to pay it down, it could be very difficult psychologically and also just financially too. And so you want to make sure you definitely could do this, do a little test run and that you can do it long term. You don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. So for you to pull the plug there and say, okay, let's just refinance it, you have to be very sure that this is something you both could handle.
Totally makes sense. It also would make sense that maybe if you are in the process of getting a mortgage, you might consider getting the mortgage while you're still in IBR and not refinancing until after you have the mortgage in place. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes, but you do also have to remember that now that you have the mortgage, the refinance company will look at your mortgage as well.
Oh, they got you either way.
So yeah, it's either way.
Fair enough. So I see how this is coming together, and I want to point out that at this point in time, now you're down to 7.5 years left to be completely done with your student loans, which is incredible. But I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into year one. You make the decision to pay off $550,000 in student loan debt. What's going through your mind in year one?
So I guess I should backtrack. This path didn't really start with paying down the student debt. It actually started with something completely different, which was that realization that I mentioned at the beginning, where I lived a life of less back in the Philippines and I came here, and at some turning point, my life experienced this dynamic shift towards excess and consumption. When I realized that, I went down this path of living with less again, trying to go back to what I had when I was a child. So I did a lot of decluttering. I explored minimalism or essentialism or whatever you want to call it. But it's pretty much this journey towards leading a very intentional, meaningful life. And through that, I became more and more frugal. Obviously, I'm cutting more and more stuff out of my life. And it got to the point where I was like, actually, we're saving so much money. We could do this finally. So that was where I started paying down student debt.
So Sam, where in your journey did you find minimalism and I guess the FI community? Was this during dental school at some point or was it immediately after? Talk us through the timeline of when you made these changes.
So yeah, I was definitely in my mid-20s. I was towards the end of dental school, but it was at a point in my life where I just felt like there was so much, like there was a lot of overwhelm. A lot of things are going on in my life. I'm trying to balance school, my relationships. We were going to get married, so we were trying to balance that and the wedding. And I just felt like, there's so much. So I wanted to cut back. And in doing so, I fell upon the concepts of minimalism and just decluttering and all of that. And when I went through that process, that's when it kind of like hit me. There was this light bulb moment where I did this once before and I was so much happier for it. So let me try to pursue this instead. Let me try to go back to living with less and seeing how that affects my life. And I'm so glad I did because it definitely went down this path of like leading me to where I am now.
Nice. So what does living with less mean in like actual practical terms of like stuff? Did you go through like a process where you threw out 70% of your items?
Yeah, more than 70%.
Wow.
I went ham.
Nice.
I went in there and I cleaned out everything. I really did get rid of a lot of my stuff. And then I started going down that rabbit hole of, well, where did this stuff come from? How does it affect the planet and the environment? And how does it affect the people on this planet? And my lifestyle dramatically changed because of that. So I stopped buying things. I stopped consuming stuff that we assume are normal. For example, I stopped purchasing plastic packaged goods when we go grocery shopping, which means, no frozen foods, no veggies in those plastic bins. I mean, it was just like this crazy dynamic change that I went through. We stopped dining out all the time because when you're young, everyone's like, oh, did you eat at that new restaurant down the street? And it's like, well, no, but I don't really have to. So I learned how to do all sorts of things at home by myself. I learned how to bake my own sourdough bread, and I learned how to fix things that are broken, in the house. So definitely a lot of changes that led me down now this frugal path of like, well, I don't have to pay for things, and I don't have to pay for someone to do stuff for me. I don't have to pay for someone to cook my meal. Simple things like that. They all add up. Small changes kind of add up in the big picture. So that's important to note.
It's so funny to hear you grappling with the packaging problem as I have started looking more and more. I'm getting like the low-hanging fruit I have started to eliminate in terms of being more efficient and making sure that the packaging and the items that we purchase can be reused in some way. And I've documented that on Friday Roundups. I still struggle sometimes with the balance of purchasing good, healthy food, albeit food that is in plastic wrapping. And so I'm thinking of like the pre-cut vegetables, that sort of thing. And I get very irritated when I do make the choice to get some sort of vegetable that's in plastic wrapping and I look down in there and I don't see the recycle sign. Like the recycle sign just makes me feel validated about my life choice. And if it doesn't happen, I just get confused. Like I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's definitely upsetting when you go out and you're like, oh, I really want this like cheese, but it's in plastic and I can't recycle this.
I can't. I'm right there with you. So like, I think this is the perfect point. You had this article that you wrote and it was called The Long List of Things That I've Given Up in the Name of Frugality. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I actually created this list mostly for myself, for me to keep tabs on the things that I'm proud of actually for giving up. So let me backtrack. Before I made that realization in my mid-20s that I was spending so much money that I didn't have to spend towards things that are unnecessary, I was spending a good amount. So I would pay for a gym membership. I would go to this yoga studio, which is $150 a month, which is crazy now to me when I think about it. We would eat out every weekend with our friends or go to like Sunday brunches. And
you were a dentist. You deserve it.
No. That's the funny thing. I mean, when you graduate from dental school, I think a lot of people I don't know if they're taught this or if they just kind of pick it up via like advertising and social media, but there's this thought like, oh, okay, I graduated. I should get myself a new car, or I should upgrade, where I live. I should live in like a nice, I don't know, pad and like on the rooftop of like Los Angeles high rise or something. But that's just part of that lifestyle creep that they try to sell. And obviously they're going to target dentists because you have the money now, quote unquote, that you're making. So they want you to spend it on things that, quote unquote, make your life better.
In this list of things you've given up in the name of frugality, are there any things that stick out to you as like, oh man, I really wish I had them back? Or has this been like a wholesale mindset shift towards frugality and simplicity and minimalism?
Yeah, I absolutely don't miss any of those things. The funny thing is, I think we're taught to consume in order to make our lives, more whole or easier or happier or whatever it is. But what we're doing really is we're being dependent on a lot of external things to give us that satisfaction in our life. By cutting all this out, what I learned was it makes you more reliant on yourself, and you actually find that happiness, that joy, that filling of whatever void it is we're trying to fill when we consume by yourself, without spending. And so the factors become internal instead of external. And you're kind of able to harbor that happiness in your life without the external stuff. And so I guess I wouldn't really go back. I mean, I really like where we are now. It's more of like changing from relying or depending on things to make us happy versus relying on ourselves to make us happy. And that's really important to us.
That's beautiful. There's no better way to sum it up than that. And yeah, I definitely challenge everyone to take a look at this list and see how many things are similar in your life that you've given up and how many are, wow, that's something I could really look into stopping the reliance on, right? As you put it. So yeah, the list hits home for me. I mean, this is almost item for item, like things that I've given up in my life, but I don't look at it as like given up. It's just, these aren't a part of my life. It's Like you said, buying books. I couldn't even imagine buying a book at this point.
Yeah, same.
Right? Like, it's amazing. Why would
Unless
you
Tim
not
Ferriss
go to the
comes out
library?
with another one.
Well, yeah, all right. That is
we
true.
all have our weak spots.
We're human.
But yeah, like, I mean, we save thousands of dollars a year at the library. You're saying paying $15 to watch a movie at the theater when you can just wait a couple weeks until it comes out, who knows, on Netflix or Redbox even for $1, drinking anything but water at restaurants. To me, that's like a crazy thing. Like, people go to a restaurant and spend $6 or $7 on a beer plus tax and tip. Are you a lunatic? You can get that same beer for like 75 cents at home. Like, why wouldn't you do that? I don't know. That's just how I approach like value decisions. In that instance, I could have 8 beers over the course of a month at home for that price of that one beer out at a restaurant. To me, that's such a no-brainer, and it's not deprivation. It's just, that's the obvious choice to me.
How do you bring finance, frugality, and freedom together? Like, what's your balance point?
Actually, that's why I separated on my blog financial freedom. It's separated into 3 categories: finance, frugality, and freedom, because I think those things, they overlap at some points, but at the same time, they also fight against each other. For example, it might not be the most frugal thing to support companies that you believe in or are creating products that are like sustainably good for the environment, but you want the freedom to be able to choose that so that you could sleep at night. You know what I mean? Like, so you live a happy life. So it's just a matter of choosing the things that would give us make us feel good about the choices that we're making in our everyday lifestyle and our decisions.
This has been so much fun, Sam. You've been very vulnerable in this particular episode and kind of sharing your backstory and highlighting, both the optimism for the freedom that your future holds, but also the very real stark economics of taking out $500,000 in student loan debt. And we just so appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story. What is the best way for someone to connect with you and connect with your content?
So I have my blog. It's thedebtist.com. And they can also email me at thedebtist@gmail.com. I am open to answering any questions for people who are going through the same thing or people who just want to talk about, student debt or whatever.
That's because thedentist.com was taken. But you're going to own this one. All right, thedebtist.com. Definitely go check out our website. And I'll be honest with you, I stumbled on your content after you messaged us, and I love what you put together. It really is fantastic. On most shows, that would be the end of the episode. But on this show, Sam, we would love to give you the chance to tackle the hot seat. Are you ready for this?
Yep, let's do it.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Sam, question number 1, your favorite blog that's not your own.
So this one is definitely, it's not finance related, sorry, but it's called readingmytealeaves.com. It's written by Erin Boyle, and she authored this book called Simple Matters. So it's a lifestyle blog that approaches everyday living from like an intentional and practical angle with simplicity and sustainability in mind. So I really love the content that she puts out there. It's about making do with what you have and still being completely content.
Okay. And we have a follow-up question. It's question number 2, your favorite article of all time. Now, this can be one that you wrote or somebody else's.
This is probably really embarrassing, but I actually do not read very many blog posts, even though I spend a lot of time on my own blog. I have one post in particular that I wrote based off of a poem. It's called #JOMO, The Joy of Missing Out. So I really want people to read that one, especially because it's very relatable. And, it may seem like it doesn't relate to finances at all, but I think our consumption is actually at the root of our inability to jump off this hamster wheel.
Oh, I love that. That is absolutely getting added to the lexicon, isn't it, Brad?
Yeah, that's super cool. And we'll certainly link to that in the show notes for everyone.
Cool.
All right, Sam, question number 3, your favorite life hack.
This one's really easy. I read my life away. I've always been this avid reader, and I think reading really opens the doors to so many different life views, and I attribute a lot of my, my empathy and my understanding I have towards other people to a past filled with fiction novels and what have you.
All right. Question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
I think this one's a little bit obvious.
Documented.
Yeah, I actually have a bigger financial mistake that we never touched on. This is going to be very embarrassing. So when I applied, there was actually 3 schools I applied to. 2 of them were private and 1 of them was public. I got accepted into the private schools the December of the previous year. So I enrolled in the one that's close to home here in California, but both were actually going to be about the same price point. And then I had started this school already, dental school. I was a month in and I was already moved in. I had my friends, I had everything purchased, like my stuff, paid for tuition. And the public school contacted me and told me they wanted me to start that Thursday. I don't know why. I said no, obviously. I think it was just out of pure laziness or convenience, but I felt like such a fool afterwards. And I look back and say, I will never choose convenience over things that I truly value ever again.
Wow.
That's a big lesson.
Can you quantify that?
Yeah. So if I had gone to this public school, it probably would have saved me about $150,000.
Or 3 years of your life.
Or 3 years of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of convenience, right? To not move. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sam, question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
I would say, especially for, people in their early 20s and late teens, never to compare yourself to others. I think it's so easy for young people to buy into concepts such as, YOLO and FOMO and having life's luxuries and being rich and material goods and having social status symbols. And definitely the world makes it difficult when you've got advertising and social media out there. But I think you should just be you. I think I would have been happier, more productive, and less in debt if I ignored all of that external bling that was surrounding me when I was younger. So, yeah.
All right. Well, talking about marketing and talking about value, we spent a lot of time talking about things that you don't purchase or things that you gave up in the name of frugality. What we want to know with this question is, what is one thing that you purchased over the last year that has brought the most value to your life?
Okay, so this is super easy. I bought 2 bannetons, which are kind of they're like wooden baskets that you rest bread in. So I got into the habit of baking my own sourdough bread, like the whole nerdy bit with like growing a yeast culture and feeding the yeast culture twice a day to make sure it lives and fermenting the bread. So that has brought a lot of joy to my life in the last 6 months. And I do not regret spending the $10 to buy those baskets.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. We haven't been doing quite as much bread in the Mendoza household lately, but I had like a 6-month kick where we were doing it every single day and we experimented with like the rye bread and the sourdough bread and all that stuff. So yeah, that is a lot of fun. The artisan breads.
Yes. I can have a whole conversation about that.
We'll do that offline. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Brad, I do not have anything to add to this. What a fantastic, fantastic conversation. Really how eye-opening this conversation was on the economics of taking out any amount of debt because the degree will always be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that was a wonderful episode by Sam. I really appreciated her coming on. And yeah, I mean, this caused me to look at student loan debt in a completely new light. And I just wasn't aware, frankly, that dental school and presumably other similar degree programs just cost this much. And people are legitimately signing themselves up for 25 years and a tax bomb at the end of the IBR. And like, that doesn't seem like the optimal path societally. Hopefully, people hearing this can understand there's got to be a better way. And yeah, I mean, I think the best way is for engaged, intelligent people like the members of our community to just look at this and realize there's something amiss here and this can't be the right path forward. So yeah, again, I really, really enjoyed it.
All right, if you got value from today's episode, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, just take 1 second, press the subscribe button on the platform you're listening to this on. It just lets the providers know you're getting value from the show and you want to be here when we produce additional episodes. If you want to support us and what we're doing here at ChooseFI, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to choosefi.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of FI, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free, and just go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of FI, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of FI. It is a fantastic starting place. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.